welcome to episode 2. Okay, so, right, we picked a crank. That's what we talked about in the last video, the differences, you know, what crank we want to use. And for this one, we're going to build this engine. We're going to use this stroker crank, okay? So, the next step for you is to get your engine, excuse me, get your engine pieces set up like this, right? So, if you look in the Chrysler manual, it'll show this as the steps to putting it back together, right? So seals, right? Bearing, I have the bearing pressed into here. And right now I'll show you how I did that, right? I do these with an Arbor Press, right? So if you're, you know, either new to this channel or however you found it, right? Some of you may know I'm in the Army, so I'm in Korea right now shooting this video. So when I came over here, when I got stationed over here, I didn't bring any of my tools, right? Hardly any, I should say, rather. I brought my Arbor Press, my Harbor Freight Arbor Press, right? Just a couple of hand tools. You know, so I just tell you that to tell you, you don't really need a whole machine shop to put one of these together. You know, you can kind of do this with rudimentary tools, and that's what you'll see now as I go to that portion of the video where I install these. Okay, so I'm using this Arbor Press. It's just a cheap Harbor Freight Arbor Press, and this piece I use it because it's from a West Bend 580 or 700. You know, this is the adapter they would use to put a smaller seal around the PTO. So the outer diameter is actually the exact same outer diameter as this seal. And you know, if I kept pressing, I could actually press this aluminum piece all the way into there. But I use it, you know, as you'll see, it's basically the tool to press it in. And also it works as essentially a stop, so that I'll show you. So as I press it in, you get to a point where I can feel the seal has just recessed below that area, below this PTO seal area, and I can feel that the you know, this aluminum spacer is starting to hit the edge of that seal right there. There you go. Perfectly even. Just using, you know, really a spacer of any size, but you want it to be, you know, or any material rather, and you want it to fit right inside that area, because you don't want to press on the inside of the seal. You know, this presses flush with the entire seal face right there. All right, so for this side, you know, same principle. You want a tool that's gonna just press on your seal flush on that outer edge. So I, you know, went to the machine shop, and the machinist, you know, was gonna make the tool to help press this in. It was like 20 or 30 bucks, something like that. And you know, it's kind of expensive just for a piece of steel or aluminum. So I found a socket in the toolbox, 13/16, that the outer diameter just happens to be the correct size. So using a socket instead. Press this seal all the way in and flush to the bottom inside edge, right, of that seal surface. So this one gets pressed all the way down. Okay, so you did that part, right? You installed your seals, you installed your bearing, right? And then for this engine, see this little cutout right here. You see that boost port that I've added to the back wall, right? So I have a big port right there, and that actually, you know, goes all the way down into the bottom of the crankcase. And you can see this is called your support plate. The way the support plate is built, it's got this little indentation right here. So that hole will actually be open, and just like these transfer ports on both sides, I've essentially created another really big transfer port right back here that's, you know, as wide as two of these transfer ports, you know, so more flow, more volume pulled up in there, right? So, okay, so we got this. You saw how we did it. Now we have this piece, right? And just like the Chrysler manual, it tells you to prepare your crankshaft onto your support plate, right? Don't forget the gasket. It's annoying if you do, you know. Ask me how I know, right? Okay. And then your next step, this is kind of a press into there, right? Not an easy slip fit, so, you know. All right, so take your time, struggle with that for the next few minutes, right? Heat, cold, right? What I used to do a long time ago is I would put the whole crankshaft into the freezer, right? Leave it in there overnight, and then the next day, if you freeze still, it'll shrink up. The problem with doing that is that once it starts to hit, you know, room temperature, then the whole thing starts to sweat and build up condensation on it. And then now you've just put water, you know, inside areas of your engine that you can't really get to. Okay, so I'm gonna pause the video, right? I'm gonna take some tools, probably my rubber hammer, bang on this a little bit, try to work this this crankshaft into there. Okay, so you do the same thing now. All right, so if you were like me, right, you've been banging around on this thing for the last hour trying to get your support plate, right, back into that bearing right there, because that bearing's a press fit, right? This one is, it's not a slip fit, you know, per se, but this one, typically you have to have a press. Right, as mentioned before, I didn't bring all of my tools over here, so I made this, right? It's just a piece of pipe, right, with a fitting on the end, and it just fits perfectly around here, right? You can see, you know, banged it up a little bit, but you can use that to tap on this and, you know, inch your support plate and your crank back on into the block, right? So once you get to that point, right, the next bit of the engine is kind of smooth sailing. Now, if you're using this as like an example of how to rebuild your vintage engine, clearly you can see that this is the modern block and the modern support plate. You know, the principle of putting it all together in that order is the same, right? Your support plate just looks different, and then your ignition, instead of using these two standoffs in a coil, you've got that stator plate that bolts on right here. right. So just go around, make sure all those are tight. So I use German specs. I remember the first time I heard that joke, I was like, German spec? What's German spec? And they were like, Guten tight. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, that's funny. So German specs. Tighten these up Guten tight. You know, or you could do the standard 1/4 inch by 20, I think is like 70 inch-pounds. It says it in the Chrysler manual. But I usually do like 90. At least 90 on these, just to make sure this is sealed up real good. All right, so we're in, support plates on. Next we got to get the ignition system set up. All right. So I just use this 243, medium strength Loctite. Great. All right, then we'll come back and we'll tighten those down.